1984. Somewhere at an altitude higher than 20,000 feet, in a wilderness of ice where not even a single tree grows, an invisible war was brewing. Not one of thundering artillery or rolling tanks, but of whispers in the snow, of silent footsteps over frozen death traps, of a race to claim nothing but cold and cruel altitude. This was Siachen Glacier, the world's highest battlefield, and soon the stage for India's most daring military operation, Operation Meghdoot. Jai Hind, I am Captain Yashika Tyagi, Kargil war veteran and a military-inspired leadership coach. In Shorter Tales, it is my endeavor always to bring to you the stories with life lessons. The stories where daredevil military operations tell us a lesson that we can imbibe in our day-to-day life or in our professional domain. This story tells us the learning of extreme ownership, how to go beyond the call of duty. Let us listen to this story, which is a story like never before. It started with a line. What line? After 1947-48 operation, when Karachi Agreement was drew up, the LOC was demarcated only up to NJ9842. That was a grid reference on map, LOC between India and Pakistan. Beyond this point, NJ9842, the agreement vaguely stated the LOC as thence north to the glacier. This vagueness gave birth to a cartographer's battleground. Both the countries interpreting line in their own way. India interpreted the line as running north along the towering South Uru Ridge, thus encompassing the Siachen Glacier. Pakistan, however, claimed it veered northeast towards Karakoram Pass, effectively gifting glacier to them. Remember, neither had troops there, but both had the maps and the ambition. Now, in the late 1970s, Pakistan began issuing permits to foreign mountaineers to scale Siachen through Pakistani routes. These expeditions, which are very well documented in various international journals, subtly portrayed the glacier as Pakistani territory. The world took notice. So did Indian intelligence. Further, in 1983, a very disturbing report landed on the desks of the headquarters of Northern Command of Indian Army. This report said that Pakistan was acquiring large stocks of high-altitude Arctic gear or Arctic clothing to be delivered before April 1984. Now the implications were very clear. This meant that Pakistan is planning some mischief in the glacier. India had to move fast, act fast. Hence, a doctrine was born of ice. At Udhampur, the Indian Army's Northern Command headquarters, Lieutenant General M.L. Chibber and under him Major General Amarnath All laid out a strategy. Cold, precise strategy. They called it Operation Meghdoot, very aptly named after the epic poem Meghdoot written by Kalidas. And this poem is about a message that is carried by a cloud. But this cloud would carry soldiers and guns and glory into the white void. Remember, there was no manual, there was no map, there was no precedent, and there was no margin for error. Helicopters had to fly at altitudes where rotor blades barely found grips. Troops would land on snow ridges thinner than a sidewalk. Men would scale walls of ice with 30 kgs pack on their shoulders, that too in an oxygen-starved air. Yet they were prepared to vanish into that glacier, not to hide, but to strike fast. And then came the frozen dawn of 13th April 1984. Just as the Baisakhi sun rose over the horizon, over the Karakoram, India made its first move. Helicopters began flying missions into the thin, biting air. Rotors groaning, struggling for lift. Laden with brave mountaineer soldiers, the machines climbed above 20,000 feet. Their blades slicing silence. There were no runways, only frozen crests. From these helicopters jumped men of 4 Kumaon Regiment, led by brave Captain Sanjay Kulkarni. They landed atop Bilafondla, one of the main passes that guarded access to Siachen. Here it is important for me to tell you that La word means pass. So Bilafondla is name of the pass called Bilafond. As they landed, snow whipped their faces. There were no trails, there were no footprints. There was only ice and mission orders. Simultaneously on another pass, the Ladakh scouts, the tigers born of mountains, were dropped near Siala, the glacier's northern gateway pass. They were led by a brave heart, Major Bahuguna. These brave men trekked the final leg on foot, shoveling through waist-deep snow. By 17th of April, the Saltoro Ridge, the real key to Siachen, was in Indian hands. Now Bilafondla, Siala and Gyeongla, the 3 frozen passes, the 3 gateways, were seized by Indian Army. Pakistan reacted, but too late. When Pakistani High Command realized that India had moved, panic set in. Elite SSG commandos of Pakistani Army were scrambled for counter-offensive. But the glacier follows a very brutal law. Heights decide winners. Now Pakistan was the one who had to climb. Into fire, into wind, and into a certain death. Their commandos attempted assaults. First on Bilafondla, then on Siala. But Indian troops were already well entrenched and they fired from heights. Machine guns spat lead into white nothingness. Mortars thundered across the ice. By June 1984, Pakistan's main assault on Bilafondla had failed. Indian soldiers held their ground. But the real enemy was not Pakistan. Real enemy was the glacier that moved, that killed. The true nemesis was Siachen itself. -50-degree temperature, howling winds, frostbite, hypoxia, crevices that swallowed men whole, hypothermia. Weapons jammed, inks froze. Even cooking was a battle. Rations had to be thawed. At night, men clung to each other in sleeping bags. Sometimes they never woke up. Evacuation was near impossible with poor weather. Even helicopters froze. Nature killed more soldiers than bullets did. Yet the soldiers stayed. Yet they built bunkers into the snow. Yet they carved helipads with shovels. Yet they carried hundreds of kilos up vertical ice on foot. In 1984 alone, dozens of Indian soldiers succumbed, not in combat, but from the glacier's wrath. But their grit would soon find its icon. Now comes the story and the legend of Bana Singh. The year was 1987. Pakistan captured a new post at 21,000 feet, perched above Bilafondla. They named it Capt Post. They named it Capt after their Quaid-e-Azam, or father of the nation of Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was called Quaid-e-Azam. So Capt Post overlooked Indian positions and it was even higher than Bilafondla. They rained fire from there. They had to be stopped. So enters Naib Subedar Bana Singh with the brave soldiers of 8 Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry. These brave hearts did not walk in. They climbed. They climbed a sheer vertical sheet of ice at night in the howling blizzard. This final assault is straight out of some storybook. It was so unreal. The final assault was of bayonets and grenades, of hand-to-hand fight, of combat inside bunkers carved into ice. It was brutal, it was primal. But they won, and the post was named Bana Top. Bana Singh was awarded Param Vir Chakra, which is highest military award for gallantry. But what is the legacy of this white void? By 1985, we had held the entire Saltoro Ridge, the high ground above the glacier. Pakistan held the lower glacier approaches, but without the heights, they could not challenge Indian positions. By all accounts, India had won. But what was the prize? The prize was endless. Through the 1990s and 2000s, avalanches, frostbites, sniper fire, and sheer exposure to cold killed many soldiers. Sometimes letters from homes arrived months late, and sometimes even after the soldier was gone. Still they stayed. Why? Because Siachen is not just a glacier. It is a strategic gate to our motherland, guarding Ladakh from Pakistan and Chinese advances. If India vacated the Saltoro, it would lose visibility, it would lose height, it would lose reaction time, and perhaps an entire valley. But more than that, India would lose something deep: honor. So how is Glacier today? In 2025, over 100 Indian posts dot entire glacier. Soldiers are deployed in rotation, trained in snowcraft and survival. Every soldier comes back with mental or physical scars. Some do not come back at all. But every soldier knows why they went. Because Operation Meghdoot is not just a military operation. It is a doctrine. It is a lesson that firepower means nothing without endurance. That the Indian soldier could not only fight at 20,000 feet high altitudes, but win convincingly. It remains the longest ongoing military operation on Earth, and Siachen Glacier remains the highest battleground on Earth. And it all began with silence. Today, on that white desert where even the wind forgets to howl, the tricolor flutters in stillness, frozen to its pole, but never bowed. Because in that land of white death, it is not the cold that chills the most. It is the memory of those men who walked into the void for the honor of motherland, not just to be remembered, but to ensure that the purpose and the mission is never forgotten. Today, let us salute these martyrs and remember that for our today, they gave their life. Jai Hind Ki Sena.